Hello everybody, this is Ugmog once again with another Warleader PvMP video. This time I've got 4 different fights to show you. 3 are 1v1s and 1 is a 2 versus 2. Alright, the first one that we start off with is myself versus a Guardian. I started off about a minute into the fight because I forgot to hit the record button when I first started the entire thing. The Banner of Terror is almost done, but as you can see right here, the Guardian's basically out of power and I've weathered his storm pretty well. And so very shortly here, I'm going to be turning off Commander Stance and dropping into Unstanced and going for a finish. I'm just popping up one more heal, and then I drop it, and off we go. At this point, the Guardian's out of power. He's blown a power pot or so he's on cooldown for that. He just popped the Thrill of Danger cooldown right there, which he could reset once, but it really isn't going to help him at this point. So you can see one thing that I'm doing against the Guardian is I'm being careful to keep the mobile meleeing going, and then as I'm able to build space and get a slight gap between us, I'll go ahead and stop and go for a heal. Right there I pop that immediately because Guardians don't have an on-demand stun that they can just fire off, so getting rid of it is not too risky. I'm likely to have my pot up again by the next time I get a stun or two, and it's just good to avoid the extra damage I can throw, particularly from positional with stagger. As I was saying, I was dropping heals when I was getting a moment to, but right now he's already down underneath 1000 health right there, and so I'm just going for the quick finish and trying to drop him now. And there he goes. And yes, those reaps you see up the hill, there's more of them off to the side, and even more of them show up. And when it gets to about 8 or 10 of them, they all jumped on me. Alright, next fight against Luke. Luke is one of the premier champions on the Landroval server. He's been around a long time. He really knows his stuff. As you can see, he's only got about 6k morale, but really that's all he needs because he knows what he's doing. Right now we're fighting in Eisendeep, and I had the unfortunate luck I was trying to get inside here and be able to get further into the mines to find him because he's been hanging out here, but I got stuck right in the middle of all these NPCs, and if I move too far trying to kite him, then what's going to happen is they're going to aggro to me, so I'm stuck. I've got to stand here and try to tank it straight up, and he's got a lot of his self-buffs and cooldowns fired off, especially Controlled Burn and stuff, and it's just not working, and there he finishes me off with a crit from Remorseless for over 1000. Alright, here's a second champion fight right from Gladfrake. This is Rainan. I fought Rainan quite a bit. As you can see, I've loaded up with some Destiny perk buffs, and this is because he's got a scroll up for extra damage. I don't have any delving stuff to add some extra mitigation or extra evasion, which is what I really need, but I just don't have them on me right now, so I just loaded up with the Destiny point perks and hope it'll be enough, but I kind of don't expect it to. My strategy here is I'm going to be going for a quick burst fight, and if he blows cooldowns, I'll go into a tanking heal mode and see if I can outlast him. I've had fights with him before, and that's usually worked fairly well, although he does tend to have a pretty good win rate against me. Alright, Banner of Terror down, that lowers his damage, lowers his regeneration rates, and really gives me the chance I need to be able to get in here. It also lets me hit harder with my shadow skills. So right now, damage is, he's got ahead, but he's a champion, so that's expected, but there he goes with the self-heal, and I realize I just can't keep up with that if he's popping his self-heal that early and it's giving him that much, and he gets me with the stun there. Bought the stun, but I'm at the risk of getting hit again, and now I'm just trying to heal up and try to tank him. He gets me all immune, but I get the heal off, nail him with the shots, and now I'm just waiting for Crack the Whip to come off cooldown, and I start my heal one more time after popping the next thing. This is where everything goes south for me because I move a split second too early and he gets the knockback and it interrupts my heal. If I'd stayed standing for just half a second more, I would have gotten that heal off and probably would have gone a little bit longer, but I think the end result still would have been the same. So you can see a champion fight, there's really not a lot of room for error with a Warleader, particularly when they're popping off a lot of their cooldowns, mostly Controlled Burn. That's the one that's really going to get you. Alright, now we're at a 2 versus 2. That Warden you saw earlier, I had run into him at GV and he refused to fight me. And then I got hooked up with Lasterclass, who's a Defiler. He's also rank 8. And the two of us have run into them over by Lugazag, and so we're going after them. Even though I've tried to explain to them through my banner that we're going to kill both of them. They don't really seem to get it at this point, and so they give us some time where we're just beating on them without them really doing anything, and that's kind of a mistake on their part. As you can see, Rainen still has that buff from the last time I saw him with the scroll up, so he's hitting a bit harder. But the problem for him is that it's just no match for Defiler healing on the move. So basically what I'm doing is I'm kiting around, letting Elasto's hots keep me up and provide extra healing. We're putting the damage on him. I'm using my pots to peel off the Warden bleeds as much as I can. And we're just focusing on Rainen because he's the real threat here. Now, I'd started off with the defensive R up because I wasn't sure exactly how hard they were going to be hitting us. It turns out that we're doing pretty well, so I switched over into R of Command for the extra damage to try to get him. Rainen's almost dead right here, and we're slowly gaining on him because he's got the 10% slow from the Defiler, but there he stops and goes for the main heal. Now, we've moved beyond banner range right now, so we don't have Banner of Terror, we don't have the command posts helping us out here. But at this point, they're so low, and we're still really high on health, so we're just going to go ahead and go for the finish. Nail him with 590, and there he goes. Rainen's down, and so it's just the left. And the Warden, being level 61, a little under level T, starts running instantly. Fortunately for us, he does not run into the keep. He decides to stick it out for the very end. Right here, what I'm doing is I decide I don't want to try keeping him in combat, because that's really not going to help us. I want to drop combat and get my speed boost going so that Elasto can go after him and try to get him in combat, slow him down and stuff. Unfortunately, I don't have voice turned on for most of this, so I'm talking, but because of the settings, it doesn't work very well. I get lucky there. I took off 1.6k with those two shouts. Those double dev crits on those. You don't see that happen too regularly. And so now he's running for it again, and we're just on his back beating him. This is a massive error on his part. If he's going to run away from us, he should be kiting us while strafing, trying to keep me in front of him so that he can get his blocks and parries. Giving us his back like this is just asking for trouble. If you remember when I was kiting around, I was very careful to keep kiting in a circle and keep Rainen and in front of me for the entire time. I wasn't too worried about Lexus because he didn't expect him to be hitting very hard. And as you can see, it worked pretty well. I got plenty of blocks and parries and other avoidances off that I otherwise would not have gotten. And there the bleed finishes.
Alright, well that's all for this time. Before I go, I do want to comment on a couple things here. First off, there is a perception, and as far as I'm concerned, a misperception when you go around forums and stuff, and to talk about soloing as a Warleader, that a Warleader should never stop to heal, that the only heal that they've got that's useful in a 1v1 is the rank 9 racial heal that's usable on the move, that they should never drop Baller's Stance, that they should never use their melee attacks, that basically your only chance is to try kiting around a tree and shouting at people until they drop. That is complete and utter nonsense as far as I'm concerned. It's like trying to play with your Warleader who is basically a cross between a Guardian, a Captain, and a Minstrel. It's trying to use that as a Runekeeper. It's like running around with a Captain saying, I'm going to use my Battle Shout to try to kill stuff and not worry about any other ability I have, if you understand what I'm saying there, okay? What you see in my fights, even against champions and stuff, I sit there, I will try to tank damage straight up because I'm built like a tank, and I'm healing because that's what I do. I'm a Warleader. I don't go for a burst type fight. That's not how the class is built. You win the war of attrition as a Warleader. Same thing for the Defiler, but they go about it in slightly different ways. Now, as you can see against the champions, one thing that you have that's really tough is you've got to get your movement down just perfectly. If you mess up anywhere, the fight's going to be over, and the champions have a lot of cooldowns available that are really going to tip the tide in their favor. The other thing that's going to change stuff is just what consumables have you used, what consumables have they used. If you can get the Delving Evasion pots and you use some of those, that really changes things a lot in the champion fight. You're going to be able to evade their clobbers more effectively. A lot more of their attacks are not going to do any damage even when they get behind you for a brief instant and stuff. It really just takes a lot of the teeth out of their attacks and firepower, which is really important for a Warleader trying to do that. You don't get your inductions knocked back as often. It's just a huge game changer there. On the other hand, when they're popping stuff like Controlled Burn, when they're using Dire Need and things, unless you're rank 9, you really have nothing that can even remotely compare to that. If you're rank 9, you've got a 15-minute cooldown for a full heal. But other than that, you've got really nothing. I mean, you could count the Banner of Terror as a cooldown, I suppose. But still, that's I stuck it in one position and they can move and fight if they want to. You've got, if you're rank 9, the Quitters Never Win heal, but 2.5 second induction for 3k morale and a little bit of power, which is not as much as you use. It's a good heal, but it's not a game changer. It's nothing like what a champion has to be able to throw at you, where they can increase all kinds of extra stuff. That said, you know, I'll still go out there, I'll still go ahead and try things. You know, sometimes it works out my favor. Sometimes random number generator helps me, sometimes it doesn't. Don't play your Warleader like something it's not, okay? Treat it like what it is. Warleader is a hybrid between a healer and a tank. You've got melee abilities that are on short cooldowns. You've got tactical shouts that are on longer cooldowns. The tactical shouts are your burst damage. The melee abilities are extra basic damage. When they crit, they can do some decent burst. I can get, on my best shots, I've gotten about 400 taken off of a Guardian, which is heavy armor, common damage, melee attack with the basic attack. I've hit 400. I believe a Reaver had him with the armor debuff when I'd managed to do that, but that's not too uncommon. The other one, Fracture, which is your interrupt, and on a 10-second cooldown, 7 seconds when you're in Brawler, that thing can hit almost as hard as Intimidating Shout when it goes critical, because it's got the same base damage. If you're fighting a Runekeeper and you're nailing them with that, you can easily hit just as hard, sometimes even harder than you can with Intimidating Shout, just because they don't have as much common defense in some cases. Don't eschew several factors of your class that are really built in there and that are important mainstays of your whole thing. Turn on your auto attacks, get in melee range, beat on them with your little axe or sword or whatever you happen to be carrying at the time. That's the prime source of your damage as a Warleader. You can't rely on using a bunch of abilities like every other class can. You've only got 5 attacks at rank 8. That's as many as you're going to get. You can't just spam them off and stuff. You gotta think about when you're using them and how you're using them, and get the auto attacks in there as much as possible, because otherwise you don't bring stuff down. You've got to use your heals when you've got them, otherwise you're just not going to last. You win the war of attrition by keeping up some sustained damage on your opponents, keeping your healing up, keeping yourself alive and in the fight, and then doing good power management. And that works for just about any class except for really the champion, because you're not going to beat that guy's power bar. In that case, that's a matter of I'm just trying to stay alive while keeping enough damage on him that eventually he goes down. Depending on the skill of the champion and what cooldowns they burned, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. And you really just got to get out there and try it and get a feel for yourself for how it works. Alright, well that's all I've got to say now. Hopefully I'll have another video up sometime soon. Ugg is out.